Friends, you are back in the territory of the Summary Club, and today we continue a very much beloved topic with short but succinct reviews in which experts literally for 10 to 15 minutes tell you everything you really need to know about each of the world's religions and known teachings. And this time it will be really hot because we have on the agenda chilling the blood and even the soul of many people, the real doctrine of Satanism. But since the portal of learning and self-development does not refer initially biased to any of the teachings and religions, we will try to briefly tell everything about the basic ideas, essence, principles and rituals of Satanism as one of the most mysterious, controversial, and can even say dark religious teachings on this planet. Satanism, or even a kind of devil worship, is most often thought to have emerged as a counterweight to the teachings and religion of Christianity, creating a cult of power, wealth, strength, and permissiveness out of the image of Satan or the devil. Usually modern people associate any satanic cults with evil, violence, secret Masonic-style orders, bloody rituals, inverted stars, and black magic, or at best, in a more modern manner. With some unbridled orgies of rich teenagers in ancient Gothic castles or temples under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or more likely, both at the same time. And let's not even change your mind, because all of the above types of Satanism are found in general at the moment, but let's deal with it in order. Of course, opinions about the history of Satanism are highly controversial, but many professional historians and scholars believe that the origins of Satanism go back to much older beliefs and religions, when nature spirits and somewhat later gods with power and cruelty were worshipped. The human being, especially in the distant past, was afraid of the great power of nature, its destructive and creative force. The main reason why people believed that there were some entities or evil spirits, and most importantly, that it was necessary to worship them. It is also natural that some, especially pragmatic people, believed that the angrier the spirit or deity, the more logical it is to worship it. After all, he is the most terrible and powerful, so he can solve more pressing issues. It is only in the Bible that Satan is directly presented as an adversary of God. It is also important that the concept of Satan is usually simply a collective image of the many dark gods that existed in the early Judaic and other religious traditions of the world, so it is hardly possible to understand who the Satanists actually worship, and many of them themselves disagree. Those who are even slightly interested in the subject are familiar with such names as Beelzebub, the prince of demons, Lucifer, the fallen angel, Baphomet, Pan, and Behemoth, all names of pre-Christian pagan gods, and the name Mephistopheles means fallen angel. Only in the Old and New Testaments is it believed that God created Satan in the form of an angel who was perfect, beautiful and wise. However, because of his pride, he considered himself equal to God and was exiled to earth for it. We also find the image of the devil in the biblical story of Adam and Eve, whereas many already know the devil appears as a serpent tempter when Adam and Eve tasted the forbidden fruit of good and evil. After that, man entered the world of duality and distinction. So it is believed that if you know good you have to know evil, if you know day you have to know night. It's like the well-known Eastern principle of yin yang, which also says that when you combine good and evil, and the manifested, and the empty, you know God himself. As long as you don't understand the essence of good and evil, and the emptiness of the manifested, there will always be God and the devil in you yourselves as separate individuals. One of the basic ideas of modern Satanism recognizes and even asserts the fact that an adequate man must rely not on some mythical religion and mysticism, but on himself. According to true Satanists, no religion in the world should be deified and no judgment should be taken as a rule. And of course, moreover, the moral codes of the world's major religions have no original holiness. They are like wooden idols of the distant past, for both are man-made, and what is man-made is not eternal and destructible. While everything sounds logical and prosaic enough, it is true that Satanism does have some negative aspects for modern society, which however are also considered normal by many people. For example, it also has such a rule as an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and then it is also desirable to crush your opponent completely, so that he then could not return and not take revenge on you. The point of this Satanist position is to stop the enemy and his outrages, even if in doing so he gets hurt or worse, you know. That is why the main idea and difference between Satanism and other religions is living life not necessarily according to some beautiful and refined morality, but rather as circumstances require. The basic principle of Satanism is also revealed in the fact that life itself is already the greatest mercy, and death is accordingly no mercy at all. And so one must live here and now, not leave the pleasures for the next. Satanism does not recognize reincarnation, afterlife, heaven or hell, as they say live and enjoy right now. Everyone is his own master and lord. The principle is also recognized: the strong shall rule their destiny, and the weak into slavery. That is, the main distinguishing feature of Satanism is that the strong ones in principle may not act morally with others, but if they wish, make the weak obey with ordinary brute force or cunning. Which is basically what we see today in practically the entire modern consumer society. The very essence of Satanism is that the real Satanist does not believe in God and denies his existence, because the history of planet Earth says that it was man who created the image of God, not God who created man. At the very least, it is recognized as a fact that God has no specific form and is impersonal. Then, how can he help the rest of us?
Subscribe to the Summary Club and watch short versions of the most popular and useful videos every day.
As we can see, God is recognized as the void nature of all things, which echoes the viewpoint of the wise Eastern religions. So if we look at our body thoroughly, we don't find any separate entity or self or soul, but nevertheless everything exists and manifests itself. So from the point of view of Eastern religions, in Satanism more or less everything is logical, but it misses the fact that according to higher world religions, like Buddhism, even this empty nature can be soul-learned in one way or another and eventually become God himself or merge with the empty nature of God, which is the nature and essence of every person and also inherently empty. Because God essentially emerged from the void and in the material form of existence visible to the naked eye, he really does not exist. Also about it, a lot of modern scientists say that everything around us is an illusion, and even material objects in terms of physics, as in fact all particles like electrons fly at a great distance from each other in a total void. But this is a conversation for the next series. The logic behind the emergence of Satanism as a modern religion is that supposedly every other conventional religion has failed to keep up with human needs and capabilities, and therefore some kind of independent religion is needed, based on the natural needs and natural instincts of the common man. For example, sexual relations, they are necessary for a man not only to have children, but often just to make him happy and satisfied, and there is no sin here. It is natural to man and one can agree with that. So in essence, if Satanism were to add some elements from other religions and tolerance for one's fellow man, there could be many interesting and useful things in it. It is also possible to consider the commandments of Satanism, although they actually exist today in various interpretations, but the basic gist will be clear either way. Satan is against abstinence in food, sex, and so on. Live, not dream. Don't deceive yourself, but just live as you know it. Grace must be earned. Be responsible for your own life. Don't earn your cheek, but strike. If you are struck, man is as much an animal as anyone else. There are no sins, just physical and mental pleasure. Satan makes the business of the church prosperous and supports the church in every way, for if there were no Satan, no one would even come to confess to a priest. The essence of the last commandment of the Church of Satan boils down to the fact that in reality all things are interconnected and evil and good, but apart from this philosophical fact, the Satanists clearly, deliberately and exaggeratedly stress that with their regular investments they personally support the functioning of the modern perverted Christian church, supposedly even better at leading people to the ideals of Satanism than the satanic teaching itself or some dark Bible. It turns out that supposedly unscrupulous priests themselves discredit their religion through abuse. For example, they use drugs, drink a lot of alcohol, corrupt women and even underage teenagers, including males. The official symbol of the Church of Satan as we know it is an inverted five-pointed star, often surrounded by two circles, which is also quite remarkable. Thus the two circles are black and white, yin and yang, or good and evil. And if one goes beyond these concepts, one can enter the very circle of one's own and present self. Also, another wise and logical interpretation of this symbol is that the inverted pentagram with the inscribed head of a goat indicates that the man recognizes that he is weak and the other four elements, fire, water, earth and air, can easily rule over him, his consciousness and his desires. But the usual straight pentagram with the ideal man written in it means that always man's head, emotions and thoughts should be above his material desires and only he himself should control all the elements, not they him. In short, the goat's head sort of hints that desires are more important to this man than some higher idea or some soul, and he most often goes along with these vain desires wants. It is true that few Satanists themselves guess about it, but most likely with the growth of intellectual and spiritual literacy sooner or later people will abandon the ideas of Satanism, Christianity and other religions, and it will be one common world religion, a religion of love and cognition of oneself, as well as the essence of higher energy of the universe ordering the laws of this world. This is what is predicted in the Bible, by the way, but that's another topic. Modern rituals in Satanism are most often really just opposed to the rites and rituals of the church and are done about the same, but in a reverse or perverse way. Sometimes they are also accompanied by sacrifices, sometimes blood sacrifices. Nowadays it is not advertised, but in the past Satanists even sacrificed people and especially children. Also, sexual permissiveness is often tolerated in Satanist cults. Group orgies, alcohol, rock and roll and drugs are often in vogue here. Although this is more likely to be done by rich teenagers who haven't had enough of it yet, Satanism's elite tend to tear down the methods and places of their leisure time. The most famous holidays of modern Satanism, usually duplicating the dates of pagan, Christian, or Slavic holidays, are considered to be Walpurgis Night, celebrated on May 1st. There are bonfires burned at night, and a great feast is held. Lammas is on August 1st, St. John's Eve when the fern blossoms is July 7, solstice days and also the night of every full moon. The first registered Church of Satan was founded by Anton Chandler LaVey in 1966, where satanic marriages, wake celebrations, child baptisms and even holiday orgies were held, though this is no longer accurate. But not long after that, in 1967, Satanism joined the list of officially recognized religions in the United States. A couple of years later, in 1969, LaVey wrote the Satanic Bible and became the chief black priest and high priest of this Church of Satan until his death in 2007. He died at the age of 67 of pulmonary edema in a hospital. This is roughly the history of official Satanism in the world, although again many experts believe that such modern churches open to all comers are only the unimportant tip of the iceberg of real Satanism. As they are usually created to make easy money, advertising and entertainment for the sake of entertainment, but the real, much more serious activities and rituals are conducted by completely different people in dozens of existing today secret societies. Of course, we will not tell you about them in detail, but they certainly exist and they are not few, and there are also many rumors about regular human sacrifices, that many famous tragedies and even plane crashes are not organized by chance, but for this very purpose. The problem is that all of this is not accurate, including the overblown headlines of the yellow press, creating a hype on all sorts of nonsense. Well, the downside is that those who talk a lot about it not always live very long. So for now with conspiracies we will stop here. In general, those teenagers who cut cats or their own veins in abandoned basements to draw circles on the walls are most likely just psychos and drug addicts or peculiar romantics. The real Satanists, however, believe that money and power are much more important, perhaps they are happiness, and also speak volumes, so they consider all world presidents, dictators, oligarchs, members of secret organizations and lodges around the world, as well as other famous and not so famous personalities with high financial status, while using these funds exclusively for their own benefit and that of their loved ones, not to help society, to be their best followers. In essence, modern Satanism is simply a desire to live for yourself in this world, regardless of what awaits you in any other world, as well as attempts to exploit the shortcomings of the system and of course the poverty, stupidity, naivety and labor of others for their own personal gain. In essence, Satanism is simply doing all the things that almost all modern businessmen, politicians and even most people who consider themselves supposedly religious, but in fact live for themselves, not in the name of some more global idea, and especially not for love and good in the whole world. After all, true believers usually live for God, by God's will, and dedicate all their actions only to Him, thanking Him for something every day or helping other living beings created by Him, while Satanists live mainly for themselves or at most for their close relatives. This is what distinguishes this belief from most other religions, where this logic is considered irrational and does not lead to happiness, but instead leads to suffering, ignorance, degradation and the like. That is, to be a Satanist most often means to be partly fixated on material goods, while believers claim that this fixation has never led anyone to God. In general, to serve God or some golden calf to choose only you, and we have one conclusion for today: any religion that is based only on philosophical and mental concepts can be misunderstood by others, although in fact all religions strive for maximum freedom and including personal happiness. It is another matter whether the philosophy and ideas of modern Satanism are wise enough to lead one there. There are doubts about this because including the most famous open proponents and even the developers of the ideas of modern Satanism do not end up very well. Including the famous Aleister Crowley, one of the most publicized dark magicians, esotericists and propagandists of this religion, as well as a member of the most famous secret satanic societies of the time, and the same, Anton Chandler Lovey, who founded the first official Church of Satan in America, ended their lives mostly not very optimistically and happily, suffering and dying from a variety of unpleasant and incurable diseases, if not begin to rot alive as a result of their obviously not very super healthy lifestyle. So, regarding health, unrestrained life, only for the sake of momentary pleasures far from always justifies itself, and on the account of happiness most likely too. That's why you and I will try to understand as many religions as possible and try to draw the right conclusion based on diverse data. See you on our portal, where we will continue to tell a lot of interesting things on religious topics and also expect from us materials and about why in general these religions appeared on earth in such numbers and what is the global divine plan in our opinion on their account. And of course, Satanism is not really a small religion, it also has many branches and varieties which also have their own philosophy, which I didn't even get to mention and which we will probably talk about yet. Write your comments, we'd love to discuss if you have any questions or thoughts about it. Also, watch other videos of dozens of religions on the channel Summary Club. And friend, don't forget to subscribe to the Summary Club for becoming more successful, educated, kinder and wiser every day. Save hundreds of hours and dollars spending on boring regular education. Feel free to write your opinions and questions about each video. We read all the comments. In addition, go to our official website, where you can find reading materials or watch other videos on channel and links in the description. All the best.